Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Hello everyone, my name is Osama Ashri, former CEO of the Saudi Venture Capital and Private Equity Association. On behalf of Jada, a PIF fund of funds company, and the Saudi Venture Capital and Private Equity Association, I would like to welcome you all to today's Jada meetup. Thank you for joining us. Scaling up a venture capital and entrepreneurship ecosystem requires sharing best practices and exchanging experiences at the international level. Today's meetup is quite distinct as it aims to highlight the qualities of the VC ecosystem across two countries, namely Saudi Arabia and Belgium. We are very delighted to have a great lineup of industry practitioners rather than just speakers from both countries who will be sharing with us their views and experiences today. I hope their practical insights and perspectives will help in boosting up the collective learning curve of the industry in both countries and create potential avenues for collaboration. The discussion today will specifically focus on some of the key characteristics of the VC ecosystem, including deal flow, as well as legal and regulatory framework. Before we get started with the panel discussion, it's my pleasure to warmly welcome the ambassador of the Kingdom of Belgium to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Her Excellency, Ms. Dominique Mineur, to give some opening remarks. Your Excellency, the mic is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all panelists and people who are attending this seminar. Let me first also thank the representative of the Jada Fund and on our side from AWEX for having taken the initiative to organize this webinar, which is meant to know each other better, share our experiences, and work together in the promotion of our economies and increase our bilateral relations. I sincerely hope that we will be able in the near future to meet in person and, more importantly, to exchange visits and trade relations between our two kingdoms. As you may know, Belgium has a structure of about 98% of SMEs. In 2019, there was just over 1 million SMEs in our country. SMEs are the backbones of our economies and essential players in the economic growth. This is even more important in the context of hopefully quick recovery after the COVID pandemic, where the SMEs should be expected to be more independent, more robust, and more resistant to external shocks. Never miss the opportunity of a good crisis. Support to SMEs, public or private, is key to their growth, as companies are sometimes too small to survive on their own. Less than a month ago, we had the opportunity and the pleasure to visit Monshart, and we saw all the facilities and the tools they provide to SMEs, with a number of solutions aimed at developing capabilities in the strategic and operational aspect, and we realized that we were experiencing the same kind of challenges. The Belgian system offers a mix of public and private supports. There is, for instance, an instrument called the tax shelter, which gives up to 45% of tax rebate on the invested amount. It's 45% for the startups and 25% for the scale-ups. There are also options to receive attractive loans in order to access international markets for exports. SMEs can address themselves to institutions such as AWEX, who's present here, or FIT, the Flanders Investment and Trade, or the Hub Brussels. At the regional level, there are also a lot of private actors, public bodies. In both countries, be it Belgium or Saudi Arabia, numerous tools exist, but this requires a proactive approach by the SMEs to find out what they really need. When it comes to finding capital, SMEs encounter other challenges, be it in Belgium or in Saudi Arabia. Together with the private bodies, such as banks, crowdfunding, or the FFF, also called Friends, Family and Fools, venture capitals, etc., And public bodies, support is provided at various stages of the growth to help finding premises, building a facility, finding investors or funding, developing products, exporting abroad, etc. So in conclusion, I think that the challenges and the difficulties we encounter are similar, even if the approaches and the solutions might be different. This is the reason why we're here today, to learn from each other. So I hope that this seminar will give ideas and foster cooperation for the benefit of our economies and our people. I thank you, and I wish you a very fruitful discussion.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for such interesting and valuable remarks. We truly appreciate it. Before we begin, just a quick logistical heads up. If you have any questions, please post them in the Q&A box, and we'll try to get to them towards the end of the session. Let's do now a quick round of introduction of our speakers, starting with our guests from Belgium. Robert and Thibaut.
Hubert, your mic is off.
Sorry, my mic is on you. Okay, thank you, Mr. Osama. Thank you for the invitation from the Jada Fund. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Hubert Simas. I work for RX in the International Finance Department. I'm also a member of the Board of Directors of Sofinex, of Finexpo, department in charge of managing state aid to exporting company, and also from Credendo, the credit insurer.
Nice to meet you, everybody. I'm Thibaut Claes. I'm working for SRIW, which is the holding fund of the Walloon region. It's a 3 billion fund, and we invest in SMB and big companies in Belgium between 1 and 25 millions. And I'm more specialized in digital companies or startups or scale-ups.
Abdulaziz and Abdullah, could you kindly introduce yourselves?
Thank you, Osama. Thank you, Your Excellency, for your speech. Certainly a pleasure for us to certainly work together on multiple projects. As for my introduction, my name is Abdulaziz Nashwan. I lead the equity funding efforts at Mushat, where we actually work with different stakeholders towards the ultimate goal of enhancing the access to funding that is provided to SMEs, and of course work on the regulatory side as well as the business challenges that are faced by the investors to the ultimate end goal to uplift the venture capital industry. I have previously worked for the Financial Sector Development Program as the head of portfolio management with the scope over the financial sector as a whole, as well as in a previous life as well worked for a multi-billion-dollar asset manager leading the investment in international equity and fixed income.
تفضل عبد الله. شكرا عبد العزيز. تفضل عبد الله.
Thank you, Osama. Thank you, Your Excellency, for the speech, and Robert and Thibaut, as well as Abdulaziz. So I'm Abdullah Tamami. I am founding partner and CEO of Mirak Capital. Mirak is a licensed entity by the Capital Market Authority in Saudi Arabia. We invest in early stage companies. We focus on technology. We do as well growth and different asset classes within the technology sector. I am as well co-founder and chairman in Hyperpay, which is a payment gateway that is one of the leading in the region and in Saudi. And we also, obviously, because of the payment gateway, we like the financial sector, as well as digital economy transformation that's happening in Saudi and beyond. So we'll be wearing different hats today as an investor as well as an entrepreneur.
Thank you all. It's a pleasure to have you with us today, and we look forward to such a fruitful and informative discussion today. And just to put the context, some context around the discussion today ahead of us, let's get started with a broad question. In your views, and this question is addressed to all of you, what are the key qualities and characteristics that constitute an attractive venture ecosystem for venture capitalists. So maybe starting with you, Abdullah, and then we move on to the rest of the speakers.
Okay, thank you, Osama. In terms of characteristics, we like to look at the journeys that we went through when we were entrepreneurs and try to solve those challenges that we had today as investors for those entrepreneurs. Today we see a lot of companies coming from Saudi and beyond trying to scale. Now there are some fixed inputs and there are some variable inputs. In terms of the fixed inputs, you have Saudi Arabia's largest economy. So naturally, it will be an anchor economy in terms of marketing growth for any company in the region. And then as well as the UAE, which is quite significant. And then comes the other markets which are growing or are already sizable in their own right. On the other end, when it comes to the variable characteristics that we look at talented individuals who can scale companies and who can grow a technology firm. And we like to see validation before that happens in terms of revenue generation or some form of minimum viable product, as well as track record maybe relative to the entrepreneurs themselves. So when we look, and then at the end of the cycle, we look at the exit strategy. Now, one of the things we're very happy about, and this comes in a collective effort with all the entities in Saudi when it comes to capital market transformation, whether investors as fund of funds, Jada, or SBC, or regulators as the Capital Market Authority, or Munshat as an enabler. The exit strategy has to be there. And one of the things that's formulating today is the capital market in Saudi Arabia, which is quite enticing. And we already have multiple companies going through that cycle to be listed in the market. And more specifically in the parallel market, which is called growth market or Numu market. So that's also something we look at whenever we invest into a company. Now, from an entrepreneur point of view, you like to look at big markets. You like to look at markets where you can impact and you can make change and you can offer something new that is not there. And we always prefer and we like something with a localized edge. Now, as you can see, there are many companies globally that are growing significantly and expanding into different markets. And we know Saudi Arabia being a large economy, it becomes a very fruitful market for international conglomerates to come into. So whenever a company comes from the region or comes to establish in Saudi, it has to have that local edge. And I'm sure maybe you have similar stories in Belgium or neighboring countries. You always want that local edge. And then it comes the talent, sourcing the talent. So one of the things we do a lot in Europe is working with technologists and developers. Europe have a lot of good developers across countries of high quality that support many of the companies that we invest in or we look to invest into, or some of the companies I was part of in terms of building. So those are the things we look at, and kind of doubling down on the existing established value chains, whether coming from Europe or elsewhere or locally within the country.
Thank you so much. That was quite insightful. And let's hear the counter perspective from the Belgian side. So Thibaut, could you please shed some light on the key characteristics that you believe are important to having a catalyzing venture ecosystem?
I will start to answer to a question with the end of Abdullah's answer, is that, first of all, in order to have a successful VC ecosystem, you need to have like an entrepreneurial ecosystem that is fruitful. And for that, you need well-educated people, which come from universities, college, but also not only from STEM, but in STEM, it's for science, telecommunication, and mathematics, but also from business schools and other categories. And then you need really like well-educated people and different and complementary profiles in order to be more entrepreneurial. In order to have this successful, virtuous cycle, you need the first successes. And it's what we see, for example, in the biotech in Belgium, and certainly in Wallonia is really, really one of the biggest sector in our region, and is the most successful biotech ecosystem in Europe. It only represents, for example, Wallonia, Belgium represents less than 2% of the people in Europe, but raised 10% of all the funds raised in 2020, for example. Then we see, for example, that the biotech ecosystem is really attractive for venture capitalists because of education, first successes, proximity with universities and big companies. We have companies like GSK, GlaxoSmithKline, that came a few decades ago in Belgium and in Wallonia, and it helped us to have more people having the knowledge of how to make a biotech successful. And then if you have all these 4 ingredients, then people, first successes, universities, and big companies, then the money will come and you will have a successful venture capitalist ecosystem.
Great, thank you very much. Abdulaziz, anything to add from your end before we move on to the second question?
Maybe a small addition. Certainly from the government perspective, the regulation as well as the procedures and all of the guidelines that are provided by the government, certainly a huge motivator to startups, to funds alike. I may just take a small example of a global trend that we're seeing, which the adoption of the idea of the regulatory sandbox, which has allowed for a lot of innovation and a lot of startups to operate in areas that were not allowed to operate in previously under certain supervisions, which thankfully, even in Saudi Arabia and in other countries, laws have developed towards even formalizing the sandbox process. I'll take, for example, the payment systems. A lot of startups have worked in the payment system under the Saudi Central Bank sandbox. They have worked for about 2 years before the central bank actually published the guidelines for formulating the laws and regulation governing this area.
Excellent. Perhaps as a corollary to the first question, what are some of the unique challenges and opportunities that are peculiar to the Belgian venture or SME ecosystem, and how would you leverage those opportunities and tackle such challenges? So can we start with you, Hubert?
Thank you, Osama. Let me share with you a slide to explain my point of view. Okay. As you said, we are in Belgium, in the south part of Belgium. I'm working for the south part of Belgium with Wallonia. This is a very small region. We have opportunity, of course. And as we said, 80% of the business population working from SMEs. But these SMEs in Belgium are alike as a fish in the water. But we have also challenges. Challenges is to have a growth to go from Wallonia, for the SMEs, from Wallonia to Belgium, and after that to Europe and around the world. But for this, they must breaking the glass ceiling. And we use 2 paths for this, for the innovation and the maturity of these SMEs. To structure these 2 paths and to support these 2 paths, we provide support. We are strictly named cluster on the regional level. In the case sector of the local economy sector, as Thibaut mentioned, is life science and health technology, digital, ICT and industry 4.0, mechanical technology, green technology, logistics, aerospatial, and now e-commerce. For that, we use, as I've named it, USB key. This is the relation, the nearly relation between university, state-owned agency, and businesses. The objective is strengthen the collaboration and information sharing to jointly develop innovative and commercially mature products. And to support that, we need to have a PPP, private-public partnership, and the collaboration with the venture capitalists, because the private sector and the private sector have a common interest. And for that, and explain further what is the regulation, could give a better framework to the installation of venture capitalists.
Maybe we'll get to the regulation part later on, but we would love to hear also about the opportunities and challenges in the Saudi VC ecosystem, starting with you, Abdullah, and then moving to Abdulaziz.
So the opportunities in terms of in Saudi Arabia, I mean, they are many, and sometimes they are filled with local, supply of companies, or even international ones, or even what we like to call maybe international local partnership. One of the things that we work on a lot is what's happening in the financial technology sector, or what is well known as fintech. Happening in the space of open banking in terms of payments, digitization, and going into cashless society. Now, in terms of the target, what happened in Saudi, especially accelerated by COVID, it was targeted to reach about 30% or a little bit less in terms of a cashless transactions in Saudi. But because of COVID, that target was broken, obviously, in a positive way, going into mid to high numbers in the 30s. And honestly, it was filled by multiple companies that are local, companies that are international, and companies that are both international with a local setup. On the other end, there is also a big digitization cycle happening from the government sector, which would require, as Hubert said, a PPP approach. This is scaling quite fast in Saudi across multiple venues, and thankfully a lot of that execution is happening from VC-backed companies, and this is where the opportunity comes, where you're solving a real problem, but you're also creating tangible value for the economy and all stakeholders within that opportunity. One example that we saw, for example, before and after COVID, or maybe more so before, is the entertainment sector, where we had a lot of events going on, and we had a lot of venues that opened up, whether in the capital in Riyadh or beyond. A lot of that supply came from private companies, whether managing the ticketing system or managing the events themselves, or even the payments for those events, as well as international players. And one of the things we like to look at is, for example, in the case of Belgium, is if we have a company that is solving a great problem in its jurisdiction country, and that problem also gets replicated in Saudi Arabia, it's great to have that partnership get established and then work together in solving that local problem, where you really create a benefit from an economic point of view for all stakeholders, whether the economy and the public sector, but as well as the private players within that opportunity. So the opportunities are vast. Honestly, to put it simply, one of the challenges we have today from an investment point of view, or even an entrepreneurial point of view, is trying to pick the right one from the myriad of opportunities that we have on the table, and trying to focus within certain verticals to have an edge. The challenge is not really in the lack of opportunities, but more in the lack of making available the resources to execute on those opportunities. And here comes the international collaboration, where you come and establish a partnership, you establish a local office, and you start executing in a way where you're solving the problem, but you're also creating wealth and economic value for all players involved.
Thank you, Abdullah. That was quite insightful. Any thoughts from your end, Abdulaziz?
Yeah, certainly. In addition to what Abdullah mentioned, one of the key challenges for the industry that we saw, a couple of years back, basically the VC industry did not exist. It's very nascent. We come up with the initiative to actually find the PPP program where we can support the creation of fund managers, where we can attract fund managers to come and set up. Hence the establishment of the Saudi Venture Capital Company, which really filled that gap and provided direct support or the anchoring of these investment VC funds and now private equity funds. Jada stepped in as well with their program, about 4 billion riyal, supporting the creation of private equity funds as well. These programs certainly covered for that. And this presented an opportunity for not only local asset manager, as well as global asset managers to set up here and benefit from these government programs that ultimately will support the startup ecosystem and the SMEs in general. Challenges also related to deal sourcing. We had a lot of difficulties in really guiding the entrepreneurial ecosystem into supporting them in their growth, supporting them in setting up. Certainly, a lot of changes that happened in the accelerators, incubators ecosystem, which I took the role of really hosting and taking on its shoulder that role. We started, giving licensing to this industry, supporting the creation of these accelerators, bringing some of the experience in that area from outside of the kingdom, also supporting the private sector itself to set up and to actually build these venture builders and accelerators, and providing all the necessary support to a level where we created programs to actually finance these accelerators and incubators. From a sort of an earlier sort of size of company or stages of company, there's a lot of progress that happened in the angel investment ecosystem. Over the past year, 3 new networks have been created where they target smaller seed stage companies. Support has been given to them. There's a lot of training that is provided to them. Also, challenges that are faced by SMEs in general, and where we created programs in Munshaat to cater for their needs. I must say, from like a sector perspective, if we look at the economy as a whole, to add to what Abdullah said, 2 sectors come to mind where huge opportunities can be presented for investors, which is healthcare and education. Healthcare and education not only are huge sectors which are experiencing growth, they are experiencing a transformation, a digital transformation that could be utilized by both investors and startups alike.
Excellent, thank you, Abdulaziz. Our next question is addressed to Abdullah Tamami. The path to venture capital could be quite challenging and murky. Abdullah, you started off, as we know, as a Saudi entrepreneur, evolved into an angel investor, and recently you have become a VC. Can you walk us through such an interesting journey, and how and why did you break into the venture capital ecosystem?
Thank you, Osama. So basically, my whole background is in computer science and math. So I come from, as Thibaut said, more STEM background. However, all my working life before that was in the investment field, whether with Merrill Lynch or Cisco Capital in the US or Jadwa Investment in Saudi Arabia. But to be honest, what was happening, it was more the right opportunity at the right time. And then, taking that opportunity. Big part of taking that opportunity is sacrificing returns on the short term for long-term gains. I was a person that could have made on a monthly basis much more than I had made in the last 7 years. But what happened is was introduced to a company that was pivoting, called Gate to Play, pivoting into a new business called Hyperpay. And then decided not only to invest, but also join the founding team in establishing the company from scratch in Saudi Arabia. And actually that company, Gate to Play, came from Jordan. So it was not really originated from Saudi Arabia. So, but the pivot, when we started from the get-go, it was in Riyadh, in Saudi, with great co-founders and other entrepreneurs involved. What happened after that is we started to build it step by step. And to be honest with you, the first 2 years, we thought it might shut down any moment now. We were only processing payments of approximately $10,000 a year or so, which is nothing in the payment industry in terms of volume. As we grew, honestly, what worked as we grew, obviously, you know, I personally learned a lot about the VC landscape, even though I come from an investment banking perspective. I had some tools that can help me get into it. So I learned a lot from it, and then established a fund with a company I was involved with called INET to invest in other companies. It was a corporate fund or corporate VC fund. After that, we started to invest as well as running Hyperpay with my other colleagues. What happened is, honestly, in the payment industry, we had a catalyst where the government here allowed debit cards, basic debit cards, to be processed online. And that instantly opened up a floodgate of demand from end users who are able now to buy online. Now, obviously, we had Visa and Master before that, and Visa and Master gave us good growth, but it wasn't sufficient. Even though we grew from 10,000 to 3 million to $30 million volume to 100 million, still, it doesn't reflect what we process today. We process today annually billions of dollars in Hyperpay. And that was truly due to the catalyst that was opened up by the government in allowing end users to process and transact online. And this catalyst now, we have, I would say, minimum 100 other catalysts in other verticals happening at the same track. Entertainment, we mentioned one. Abdulaziz mentioned healthcare and education. Big scope and very different from financial technology or entertainment. And the same catalyst happening everywhere. And in the case of Hyperpay, we actually had an international partner from Germany called Payon. That was our partner of success in delivering that, or filling that demand. And they grew with us. It so happens that after 3 years of our partnership, they also got acquired by a company called ACI in the US, or ACI Worldwide, a payment company, another payment company. So I've been through the case of not only building a company, but also partnering with international companies that give you a lot of value where everyone comes out winning. The landscape itself and the ecosystem itself, where you enable whether the government or semi-government or private sector to purchase and buy online, or also enabling the economy to go from cashless or to go from cash-based society to a cashless society. And then through that landscape, we learned from an entrepreneurial perspective, myself and my partners in Mirak, how companies are built and what are the opportunities that you can build on. And here comes the story of Mirak Capital, where we established a capital firm licensed by the Capital Market Authority and partnered with our success and great partners, Jada, in building one of the first truly regulated and compliant VC funds in Saudi, which now, in terms of also, and I want to touch maybe on Abdulaziz's point in terms of investments and GPs and investors, the demand here from investors wanting to access this asset class is unprecedented. Thank God we got oversubscribed within a matter of weeks in our fund. That just showcases the demand from an investor point of view. And then now we have the pipeline, which is multiple entrepreneurs understanding the opportunity is there and leaving their jobs, forgoing the short-term gain for a longer-term gain, which will create that pipeline for you. So you supply the money and then creating the pipeline, the opportunity, and then the funding comes afterwards. And today, we run an investment house where we focus on early stage with a seed, Series A, or growth stages, as well as pre-IPO and IPO companies or public companies, all in the technology space. And truly, we would not have been able to do this if it were not for our entrepreneurial track record or our entrepreneurial successes. Did we have failures or bumps throughout the road? Absolutely. Absolutely we had, and that's part of the game. But it's all about being ready at the right time when that catalyst happens and it opens up. And I'm so happy that this story with Hyperpay happened with a great international partner, which is Payon. They got acquired and they had a lot of returns for their shareholders and their stakeholders, and today with ACI. And even in the other portfolio companies today that we have in our new fund, looking to partnering with international partners at the same scale in different verticals to access and execute on a faster manner. There are a lot of technologies today that you don't really need to reinvent the wheel in it. It's available. So doing it through a partnership and executing on it, that's where you accelerate the cycle and everyone wins, as well as the economy itself.
Thank you, Abdullah. Quite impressive. I'll move on to Thibaut and Hubert. If you have anything to add, how did you break into venture capital in Belgium? And maybe if you can quickly also go over some of the key sectors that are attractive and lucrative for VC investors in Belgium.
It was very interesting to hear from Abdullah's own experience, because it's going from entrepreneur to VC. I'm not an entrepreneur at all. And then I will answer your question about how to break into VC more as you are already a VC and what do you need to do to be a successful VC. Abdullah spoke about the part before being a VC and know what he's doing. But to first answer to a question, not your original question, but your second question about the two main domains. The two main domains in Belgium are digital and biotech. It's approximately more than 1 billion euro that is now invested in digital each year, and approximately the same amount, 1 billion each year in biotech too. But regarding Belgium, you have like more digital ecosystem in the north of Belgium than Flanders, and the biotech ecosystem, which is much more developed in the south, Wallonia, the south of Belgium. And then it's really attractive because this year, I think that for Belgian companies, we had like 4 IPOs and 2 or 3 in the Nasdaq in the biotech sector, and 1 or 2 in the Belgian public markets for digital companies. Then it's becoming more and more attractive for VCs. In my first answer, I told you about the liquidity, the first successes, and now we see that we are more and more successful in this kind of experience. But to answer your question about how do you break into VC from the moment that you are already a VC, I think that most of the people think that a venture capitalist job is to buy stocks, but in fact you are more in a sell mode than in a buy mode. Why? Because, as Abdullah said, there is a lot of money for the moment on the market to invest in small or growing companies, and then you need to be as closer as possible to the entrepreneurs. And then the first things to do is to connect with the entrepreneurs in the early stage. It's more the hunting phase that you need to have. It's really like connecting, going to events or to be known. And that's the second one, is to have your first successes. Can be exits, it can be having companies in your portfolio that raise Series A, B, C, and so that you are attractive for the entrepreneurs as a fund. Also, what's really important is to co-invest with local and international investors, and it's why it's interesting to have such a panel today, to know other international funds, to have co-investment with, certainly in digital and biotech, because we know that from the Series A or B, you need much more capital than what we can find, for example, in Belgium. Then we need to have like international investors coming to our country and to co-invest with us. And the two last advice that I will give to someone being a venture capital is to be as human as possible, because people think that VC is a financial job, but I think that it's only 5% of my time. 70% of my time is on a relationship with entrepreneurs that we invested in entrepreneurs that we would like to invest in, or entrepreneurs that want to meet with us. And then it's really important to be human in the good and bad moments with the entrepreneurs, and also to add value. And then adding value is a buzzword because every VC says that it will add value. I don't think that we can help entrepreneurs on their strategy or to be really deeply in the operation, because entrepreneurs know their business better than we do, but we can connect or them with other people in our network or giving advice, but really to say it's an advice, not an order. Then it's always the entrepreneurs' companies, and they make the choice to go to this direction or another.
Oh, thank you for such practical and valuable insights and perspectives. Moving on to the policy and regulations side, as we know that policy and regulations can have significant impact on the creation and sustainability of an ecosystem in which venture capitalists and venture capital in general and innovation thrive. Maybe this question is addressed to you, Abdulaziz, starting with you. Can you highlight some impact ensued from the recent regulatory reforms in Saudi, and more importantly, what roles do VCs play to affect such change or hack regulations, so to speak?
Sure, thank you, Osama. I think it's very important to highlight how the model for setting up policies and regulations have really accelerated here in Saudi Arabia in the past 2 years. In addition to that, we've seen also a model changing where the private sector, the key stakeholders are the ones who are driving this regulation. I mean, cases for the new company law that is about to be finally approved, as well as the what we worked together last year with the association around the investment fund regulation, which, by the way, about an hour ago has been approved and published. These provide an example of where key stakeholders, investors, startups, different government entities have sat together, discussed the impact of the changes in the regulation. What regulation do they need to foster the prosperity of their businesses, while at the same time making sure that protection is being given to investors, to startups alike. Particularly, we're talking about small investors. Like an example of that would be the introduction of the simple corporation, which basically removed all the capital requirement for setting up a company, a corporation to be exact, which is a form that is preferred by investors for ease of treating the shares and such, as well as there is no minimum number of owners for this type of companies. I may maybe highlight the selling period that was prohibition to actually sell part of the company within the first 2 years of establishment. That has been completely removed, and it's expected to be implemented in April, inshallah. Investment funds regulation have seen also a lot of changes with now the ability for private funds to list in the market and be able to provide an exit strategy for unit holders of the fund, readily available in the market. The ability to even market the fund itself to a wider scope of retail investors. The minimum requirement previously was 1 million riyal. Now it's you can actually sell the units of private funds to investors up to 200 riyal. You also hinted towards the impact that some of these changes, regulation, the government programs. I think there is a lot of changes that we have, actually tangible changes that we have seen in the ecosystem over the past, let's say, 12 months or so. We've seen the significant growth in capital or VC capital that is invested in startups. 55% year on year for the year 2020, over approximately 100 startups. We have seen, the emergence of not only existing asset managers coming to the market with funds. We've seen regional and global funds setting up here. Emergence of funds like maybe Mirak as well, who are not probably setting up this fund for the first time. The ability or what we've seen in the angel investment industry, the crowdfunding, now we have 3 or 4 crowdfunding platforms operational, providing opportunities for even the retail investors that we actually aspire to have towards increasing the funding for startups and SMEs alike.
Thank you so much, Abu Saud Abdulaziz, for such recent updates on the impact of the recent regulatory reforms that took place in Saudi. I'll turn it over now to Hubert to shed some light on some of the impact that followed some of the regulatory amendments and regulations, and what role influencing regulatory changes.
Thank you, Sama. Let me share with you a second slide to explain this, the most important reform for VC. The regulation, of course, and one of this reform that have the most impact of the interest for VC to set up and invest in Belgium are the tax shelter, as mentioned by Your Excellencies Mrs. Miner. The tax shelter permit investment to SME, startup, and scale up. Suppose that allow them to invest through a crowdfunding platform, as for example, Spreads. For the investor, investing through a crowdfunding platform helps them to diversify their risk and increase their chance of success. Interest for the VC, tax reduction of maximum 45% on the investor term. The second reform is the holding. Holding company is a company in Belgium in the value of entity that owns the outstanding stocks of other company. She usually does not produce good or service itself. In Belgium, a holding pays a tax of 0% on the capital gain. And for the last, the private, this is a specific status for a company that encourages investment in a new and growing company like a startup and scale up. It's a Belgian investment company that turns out to be very useful for a tax point of view to optimize your return on investment in non-quoted and grow company, as for example, scale up. Private statute allows you to benefit from a favorable tax regime up to 0%. But to assist the VC who wish to invest in Belgian company, there are agencies such Walloon and Export Investment Agency. And we offer a set of services to the investor in different sectors as the real estate, the legal, taxation, human resources. We offer also another support is the incubation. Incubator offers frameworks to accompany and provide personalized support when an investor, VC, wish to set up in the territory. And last but not least, I draw here the springboks to reach the European dimension, because the Belgian location facilitates the transition of company and can thus serve as a springboks to develop its business in Europe. We start from Belgium, from the south of Belgium. It's a kind of mini Europe where we find customers with a more German culture in the north and a more Latin culture in the south. Testing a product on the Belgian market is like testing this product in the northern and southern of Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hubert. Moving on, Abdullah, as a key player in the Saudi VC and PE ecosystem, what would be your advice to a Belgian investor who wants to plug into the Saudi venture capital and entrepreneurship ecosystem? Abdullah.
Thank you, Sam. So simply, I think one of the, once this whole COVID thing gets passed and we all come out of it in a positive way, definitely a visit. So Saudi is one of those places that to understand it, you have to be here. Let me give you an example of a company that is international asset manager who came, established, and cannot keep up with the demand they're getting from Saudi. They're called 500 startups from the US. You know, when they came in Saudi, it was just a visit that they came to check out the place and see what opportunities can be created. Not only did they establish a fund where it was housing many Saudi investors, but they also collaborated to create accelerators with multiple government or semi-government or enterprise level agencies, which created numerous batches of high valued startups or technology ventures. And it just comes from that, just coming and visiting. You know, Riyadh, the capital, it's becoming one of those cities similar to New York. It has its own economy going on, and there's a lot of things going on that if you're not there physically, it's difficult to imagine and believe how fast the cycle is moving. So definitely I would recommend a visit. Second, I would highly recommend working through partners. I think that has always proven a great model. Now, in the case where the investor or the firm wants to establish a big scale operation, they can come and scale and hire and establish an entity here. But that only works, you know, when they are willing to invest in a significant way initially. But just to get a stepping stone where you just start establishing your presence, partners can be very helpful. Today at Mirac or Hyperpay, we work with numerous partners across the globe, whether through creating investments, just like what Thibaut said, is you mentioned that, you know, the Belgian ecosystem is one of those ecosystems that requires a lot of money coming from outside also to grab the opportunity. So this is one of the things that happen in Saudi Arabia, is that a lot of the opportunities that happen in Europe or US or even China get exposed as well here, where investors can have access and help other countries to scale companies within their ecosystem. And then you have the second level of collaboration, where not only they help to scale in that country or that jurisdiction, but also they help that company access the Saudi market. I can name multiple companies that we worked with to help them access in Saudi Arabia or even just GCC. One company we worked with in the US, we helped them access in UAE. And then we have, you know, I worked with multiple investors from the US who invested with us in UAE or even Saudi. So there are a lot of venues that you can work with. I would break them up as such, which is, you know, once this whole COVID thing gets passed and we're done with it, hopefully for the better, you know, a visit will always be fundamental, and I'll be happy to welcome anyone. So please, you know, feel free to reach out to me at any time to welcome and showcase the opportunities here. So that's definitely where it starts, and then deciding on the scale, whether through partnership or establishment or even having a regional HQ. It depends on how long-term the vision is, as well as knowledge is accumulated about the region.
So I guess our Belgian friends will take a rain check for their next visit to Saudi. Thank you, Abdullah. Indeed, I couldn't agree anymore that Saudi has become a very attractive ecosystem for international investors. And you spoke with some examples. You shared some examples of some of the cases that took place recently. I'll turn it over to our Belgian friends, Tabu or Hubert. What would be your advice to a Saudi investor who wants to plug into the Belgian venture capital ecosystem?
I think for me, the most important point of view is this diversification, because we have a lot of opportunity and new opportunity after the crisis of the pandemic. New sector of activity appears, like as e-commerce, for example, quality of food, of course, life science, but also the silver economy, science in relation with the whole population that we have in Europe. And also the logistics is very important, that the importance will be was demonstrated during the pandemic. It's for me, and also for our small companies, SMEs, so startup and scale up, the capacity to grow abroad in Europe and also all over the world. But we have also a lot of opportunity in project in other continents. In the water sector, we have very good knowledge of the distribution and sanitation of water. And I think, and also renewable energy, of course, with the new development in hydrogen. I think that that's the new sector for the future that VC could be invested.
Thank you very much, and we look forward as well to visiting also Belgium very soon after this COVID crisis is over very soon, and to get to know more about the venture capital ecosystem in Belgium in person and visit physically. We have a couple of questions from the audience. The first one is from Mazen Shambari. What were the toughest challenges facing the Belgian ecosystem early on? And on the flip side, what were the most attractive opportunities that came alongside those challenges? I think you alluded to both the challenges and opportunities early on in the discussion, unless there are, other things that you would like to underscore more specifically.
Yeah, the challenges for VC ecosystem in Belgium is that you don't have that much VC funds. And the first problem that we have, certainly in the digital sector, I think that we have like 5 or maximum 5 private VC funds in the digital sector, much more in the biotech, because the biotech sector is more mature. Then I think that digital sector lag 15, 20 years in comparison with biotech. And then you need a lot of governmental money to support the emergence of these ecosystems. It was the case in biotech. Now it's a successful ecosystem. It's attracting a lot of international capital. And what we had 20 years ago in biotech, we are now leaving it with digital. And then it's really like having the first successes to show to the younger or older entrepreneurs, there is the path to success and you can try to do it. It's really like the biggest challenge that we have today, that it's lack of funds because of originally lack of companies. Now the number of companies growing, slightly growing, but then we know that we need a few first successes to be really as attractive. Biotech is not a question anymore. It's more in the digital, which are the 2 biggest sector to be invested by VCs, in fact.
Thank you. The second question, it was from an anonymous attendee. Could you tell us what hopes you have? It's addressed to Her Excellency, the Ambassador. So what hopes do you have for future collaboration between Belgium and Saudi Arabia in the venture capital area and private equity space, overall? So anyone from the Belgian side, Your Excellency, if you're still around, could you please share with us your thoughts, or anyone from the Belgian side? Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. I think, first of all, I mean, with the conclusion of this meeting, of the exchanges we had, I think we have to really come and see each other and visit each other and really have a tangible experience of what we are all going through. I think that's one of the most important things, and I hope that this will happen very soon. But I would prefer to give the floor to someone who is more of a specialist on these sort of issues, and I don't know if Thibaut can jump in and respond more precisely on that kind of questions.
Sorry, I didn't get the question that good. Could it be possible to repeat it, Osama?
Absolutely. So the question reads, could you tell us what hopes you have for future collaboration between Belgium and Saudi Arabia in the venture capital and private equity space?
Okay. The best one is that it depends if then the first that I mentioned is the co-investment. Then we are looking for co-investment for the companies that are growing from Belgium. As I told you, we have a lot, certainly Wallonia, a little bit more in Flanders, but of governmental money than the problem. It's not really the problem, but that this money is targeted to invest in the companies that are located in Belgium, but we are really happy to welcome Saudi companies that will like to expand to Europe and to have an headquarter in Europe, in Belgium, and then we can co-invest with. But it's certainly to have like co-investors in the biotech company first, and then also in the digital companies that Belgium can propose to international investors. Because for the moment, it's biotech sector is really hot in Belgium, and I think that, as Abdullah said, that there is money to invest in the young growing companies in Saudi Arabia. I think it's really one of the sector Saudi investors should look at in Belgium is biotech.
Excellent. I guess this is a very good note to end our today's meetup with. At the very end, I'd like to thank our speakers for such a very informative, insightful session. I'd like to also thank all of our guests in the audience for joining us today. Many thanks to Jada, Adari, and the Saudi Venture Capital and Private Equity Association for their outstanding efforts in organizing today's event.